because a lot of guys like this idea of growth, and it's like, well, with growth comes a lot of pain. And if you don't know these things to predict in the future, which is where the pro forma is so helpful, you can put yourself in a very bad spot very quickly.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Life by the Horns. How's it going, Dustin?
I'm very caffeinated right now, so I'm good.
Cool. Well, guys, December exposes you, and not the Instagram version, the real you. And this is typically the month where leaders sit down and ask the uncomfortable questions, like, did we actually do what we said we were going to do? Or where did we show up? Where did we fall short? And what problems are we carrying into the new year if we don't fix them now? So today, we're going to be diving into the end of the year framework that we teach inside Limitless Leaders, but through the lived experience of someone who's actually in the arena every day. So, Dustin, before we unpack the tools, let me just start here. When you look back at this year, what's the first truth that hits you?
One, it was a great year, but it was a great year because of the investments that I've made in myself.
And where do you think, let's unpack that, where do you think you grew as a man and as a leader, and what does that look like, and what did it expose for you?
Yeah, it's probably going to sound weird. I think I grew more inward, versus, on the outside per se. It's really exposed. When I look back at previous years, it's exposed a lot of failed leadership attempts where I thought I was checking off all the boxes and doing everything right. And I look back and I'm like, man, I'm embarrassed, by some of that. But yeah, that's probably the biggest takeaway for me.
Yeah. You said embarrassed. What were you, what like maybe one thing that you're most embarrassed by?
That I led with a whip and really was hyper focused on, building this performance-based culture versus a people, based culture.
Yeah. So, people think that December is holidays and it's kind of slowing down, but for leaders, December is your report card, right? So, it's clarity, not shame. So before we get into the tools, let's get your perspective. What do you think, what part of your leadership surprised you this year? Like good, bad, or indifferent?
Yeah, the good, I really leaned into, the team to shine in their genius versus a lot of times what has happened in past for me, things are going well. And because I'm very hypervigilant and have been so used to operating in this, place of scarcity, I would always think, what's wrong or what's going to go wrong. And then I'd pump the brakes on growth and then start micromanaging the shit out of the team. And whether it be, Best Life Group or other organizations that, I've, helped grow or been a part of, or, that were my own. That was just this constant like loop that I was always in. This year it was just like, what? The only way to scale and grow is kind of release, a lot of that constant desire to control.
Yeah. So how do you think it affects the team? Like when you get in those seasons, like how, like
if I were doing that?
Yeah. If you were doing that before.
Oh, I mean, you could probably answer the question, but better than I, but I think it's kind of unnerving. It's like, man, you gave me this role and you've put this trust inside of me, but you don't trust me enough to do it when things are getting a little chaotic. So I guess I'll just sit here and wait for you to call the shots. And it takes a lot of entitlement's the wrong word. It takes a lot of the ability for people to feel comfortable making decisions on their own because you do trust. And that doesn't mean that every decision that the team makes is necessarily the best decision, but it brings me a lot of confidence knowing that we've got a bunch of amazing people that, have the confidence in themselves because I've released the reins, so to speak, to let them really lean into their greatness.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel like this year you grew your team or did you exhaust them?
Grew.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I agree.
100%.
So let's dive into the tools then. So the first tool that, and this is a really cool tool that you shared with me maybe a year or so ago. And I felt embarrassed that I had never seen it before. And I'm sure a lot of other business owners may feel the same when they look at it. But the first tool you use is a pro forma, a future pacing kind of P&L. And you look at, what with your existing P&L, and you use the pro forma to kind of plan for the future. So Dustin, you always talk about facing the truth first. So let's go there. When do you look at your P&L for the year, and what do you zero in on first?
I mean, I look at the P&L all the time, but really the things that I zero in on first, one is profitability. I mean, revenue is cool. It's something that's fun to talk about. But at the end of the day, like, revenue is what feeds your ego, and profitability is what feeds your family. And it's what creates the opportunity for your team and growth and all that kind of stuff. So, for me, at the end of the day, profitability is first and foremost. Other things that I look at are massive amounts of software expense that we have, and where we potentially leak there, because we all sign up for all these great tools and whatnot, and then you find another tool, and then you forget about the one that you were using, and it doesn't seem like a lot at the end of the day, but when it's $20 here, $50 there, $100 over there, you could very easily have a couple $1,000s a month in expenses on the software side that you don't even lean into and leverage anymore, and that's just it's a big hole inside of this bucket. So that's, those are primarily the two things. The other thing that I look at very heavily, though, is just our cost for production as a whole to do what we do, and trying to keep that in a healthy place. But at the same time, I'm very mindful that I want to pay people well enough to where, it's in our freaking name, like they're living their best life too.
Right. You mentioned something. You said, the difference between revenue and profitability. We talk about this a lot, but you have a lot of businesses out there, and I'm sure you've experienced it. I'd love you to comment on this, but, businesses that have, they're talking about their revenue all the time, but they're not making anything.
No. And they don't even know how to answer the question. It's one of the things I talk about all the time inside of our discovery calls, is we talk about, profit margins. And then they start talking about, well, our cost to deliver is about 30% of revenue. And I'm like, I'm glad we know that, but they still don't even know what their profit margins are, or what their income is and what they're bringing home. So, which is tough, because a lot of guys like this idea of growth, and it's like, well, with growth comes a lot of pain. And if you don't know these things to predict in the future, which is where the pro forma is so helpful, you can put yourself in a very bad spot very quickly.
Yeah. So what do you think is one hard truth that, your numbers force you to face as a business owner?
Well, I mean, to your point, it's a scorecard. It doesn't matter how you feel. I mean, the numbers don't lie, unless you've got a shitty CPA or bookkeeper. I mean, they don't lie. It is the reality of, the health of your business, with respect to, its ability to grow. And I know culture and that kind of stuff doesn't show up on there, and that's another thing to look at, but it's just a harsh reality of how things are actually going.
For yourself in business, where do you think you might have overestimated yourself, specifically here, and where did you maybe underestimate your team this year?
Oh, actually, yeah. Where I overestimated myself was my ability to, do anything and everything for everybody. And I wear the sales hat and the customer acquisition hat, clearly the content hat, and also the strategy and visionary side. So I made all these containers in my schedule to try to accommodate all that. At the end of the day, I'm leaning way more into my energy as a whole versus my schedule. And so if my energy is tapped out, like, I hate it, but I'm not going to do everything, get everything done for everybody. And that's just the harsh reality of it, because I'm not going to sacrifice burnout for people pleasing, basically. For the team, where I underestimated the team earlier in the year, was everybody's ability to shine in their own genius and lean into that, whereas I felt like, because I have this fixing nature of myself, and I want to fix everybody, and they don't need fixing. They need to be seen. And so, until I started making that pivot, probably halfway through the year, that first half of the year, yeah, I feel that, I very much underestimated the level of, performance the team could bring, and not just in KPIs and, how they lead client accounts, but just how they show up as themselves.
Yeah. So thinking about the team, what are some questions that you may ask them in year-end reviews, and how do you get them to answer honestly versus those rehearsed
Yeah.
answers?
So we don't do year-end reviews, and that might shock some people. We don't even do them, every 6 months. We actually do them monthly. It's called a 30 every 30, and it's supposed to be 30 minutes every 30 days. It generally takes about 45.
Yeah.
It's just a cutesy name, but it's really a self-reflection. So they're rating themselves, 1 through 4 on their strengths, that we identified through a Clifton Strengths 34 test. They're rating themselves on their core values, and then they're rating themselves on the company's core values. And what I love about it, some people are so introspective and hard on themselves, and I value that. I mean, I'm like, man, you're harder on yourself than I would be. But you really get to, take a walk, so to speak, in their head and see, where they're at. And, the realities of what your perception is as a leader and what they're telling themselves. And hopefully there's an alignment there. If not, there needs to obviously be some conversation around that. But what I love is it creates this just beautiful environment and ability for people to show up who they are, as they are, speak about what's going really, really well and what's not and how they're going to fix it. And then watch them course correct themselves versus you have to be the one there saying you did good here, you did bad there. Because I hated those when I was, in former companies, and you would get that yearly review, and then because they didn't want to pay you any more money, they had to tell you in a couple of areas where you sucked and you totally disagreed with it. And you're like, no, I'm a fucking rock star, but I understand why you're doing this. And it just felt like we're just looking at this as far as dollars and cents, not, my true performance. So that's something that I don't prescribe to and do here.
Yeah. So it's monthly, not the yearly thing. So everybody wants to grow, right? But no one talks about what growth tends to break in a business. So when a business scales, pressure kind of exposes the cracks. When your companies grow quickly, what do you feel? What are the values that you feel like get tested first?
If they exist, the core values in the organization, are they just words on a wall that are cute, or do we actually lean into them fully? I think the next thing that breaks is generally the business owner or the primary leader or leadership. Everyone likes this idea of growth. You may not be in a season where you're actually aligned with it. Logically, you may think, yeah, this is a really great idea, but you've got so much chaos and turmoil going on in your own life, and you're not taking care of yourself. And then you think, okay, I'm going to grow my business by 50 or 100% this year. And you've got a really weak foundation. And, when someone comes alongside us, we expose that very quickly. Everyone loves this idea of growth. And it's so sad on my end when we get, have this unfortunate conversation. They're like, hey, we just can't do this anymore. And it's like, wait a minute, the business grew 50% in 4 months. And then immediately it's like, oh, it's a cash flow issue. Oh, they're spending too much money on these fancy new cool things that are very tangible. And I get it, but they generally just don't have the financial acumen or leadership ability to grow, a good team that's getting the job done. So what do you do generally as the business owner? You work more. That's not, there's seasons of that for sure, but that's not my ideal.
No. When you specifically with us though, when you look at what did you see this year that may have made you think at any point, if we're not careful, this might break us?
Back in May, we had a really fantastic May. You guys, being as great as you are, just kept saying, yeah, go, 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 keep selling. And I was like, guys, y'all don't see what I see coming. And I took my foot off the gas, because at that point we didn't have, the same structure we have now. And we made a ton of changes to things that we do internally because of it. But I knew for a fact it was going to expose weaknesses. And, for me, it was more important to not chase a number, and you guys honestly go through some of this toughness to learn about yourselves and to learn about, our systems and structure and everything else and where there was opportunity. And so, yeah, I knew it was going to come, and I'm glad we lived through it, and we're going to live through it again.
Yeah. How would a business owner know, when it's important to pump the brakes versus go ahead and hit the gas and allow the team to go through those issues?
Yeah. So there's intuition naturally. if you've been a part of or had many of your own businesses and you've been through these radical growth, curves, they're fun to an extent, but they do stress, a lot of the weaknesses inside and you. And I think bigger than anything, you really have to pay attention to your people. How are they showing up? Not the words that they're saying, but you can see it on someone's face if they're exhausted.
Yeah.
You can see if they're not checked in, so to speak, to the meeting. You can see, by, the level of context that they may or may not provide inside of an email or in a meeting, because their head's in 27 different places because all they're thinking about is all these tasks that they have to get done. And so regardless of the words, and hopefully there's enough, foundation of trust there where they're being completely honest. But I also think a lot of times, like, even if you're a leader on a team or someone that's, just a specialist in producing inside of the team, the last thing that anyone of us want to have sometimes is this humble moment or some humility to say, I'm fucking drowning.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, like, I've had these moments in business where I reached out to my business partner and I'm like, bro, I'm fucking drowning right now. And I'm like, oh, and then, and I'll never forget, Michael, responded back to me and he said, good thing for you. I was trained in search and rescue in the military. I got you. and I really cherish that moment, but I just think, paying attention to the people is the biggest thing.
Yeah. So how do you decide who belongs in a strategic conversation versus who doesn't?
So most are familiar with their P&L, and the pro forma is a future pacing P&L. The way to leverage it as a business is you can literally just you can put your P&L in a spreadsheet, take that same information, so all the buckets, for the expenses and income and everything, take that same information, wipe it clean as far as all the data that's in it, and, know the information. But then you're looking at, okay, January, February, March, all the months through the year, what are we striving for when it comes to, growth and what that looks like? And then based off of that, a lot of guys go, oh, I want to grow by 50%. Well, how is that going to show up inside of these other buckets? So most are familiar with their P&L, and the pro forma is a future pacing P&L. The way to leverage it as a business is you can literally just you can put your P&L in a spreadsheet, take that same information, so all the buckets, for the expenses and income and everything, take that same information, wipe it clean as far as all the data that's in it, and, know the information. But then you're looking at, okay, January, February, March, all the months through the year, what are we striving for when it comes to, growth and what that looks like? And then based off of that, a lot of guys go, oh, I want to grow by 50%. Well, how is that going to show up inside of these other buckets? And what it does is it allows you to look at, okay, yeah, the revenue number looks nice. Also, is it something we can realistically even do in that month? Because some months, especially if you're, let's say you rent equipment to people. If you don't have enough equipment, you can say all day long, during all these months, I want to grow 50%. But if and say the month of June, you're fucking maxed out anyway, 50% is not a reality in June unless you get more stuff. Or you may say, yeah, we want to go from 150,000 a month to 350,000 a month next year. But how does that show up in your team? How many people do you need to hire? At what months, as long as all this is going according to plan, do we need to start pre-planning hiring? Because most people hire very reactively when it's too late. And then you take a new team member and you drop them in a bucket of chaos and you expect them that they're going to have a great time. It's like, no, there is no training. The time is now. We train while we're working. So it allows you to see all these things, but it also allows you to predict profitability with, what you're doing, so that you're not surprised in the month of April when you're like, oh man, our revenue's great, but I had to hire all these people ahead of time, get them trained for what May is going to look like. And we actually might lose some money because of that in April as we prepare for May. So it's basically a future pacing roadmap, and it allows you to take your active P&L as you're looking back and compare it to this, guesstimation, so to speak, for your pro forma. And where did we actually show up and predict things correct? And then also when you look back at your pro forma from the previous year, you can also look at where did we make not great predictions. Like for us, it was software. I did not anticipate we would be spending this much. Now it's been a huge help for us for a lot of things, but in next year's pro forma, it is definitely something that will be anticipated and potentially more just because it, we've learned from it basically.
God. So like we said, so the next tool is knowing who actually belongs in the room. So most leaders invite everybody because they don't want to have people left out. How do you decide who is supposed to be in those strategic conversations versus who shouldn't be in?
Yeah. So I mean, most businesses all have meetings. At least I hope you do, to some extent. And we have, leadership meetings that we do every other week, and it's about all of the things that we're doing to work, on the business. It's not, oh, did all the tasks get done? And all. No, it's where do we see weaknesses and opportunities, and where can we lean into that and quote unquote fix or make it better or elevate it, whatever you want to say. So with that though, not everybody who's a leader in your organization needs to be there. And I've, experienced the side of this where you do that. And it's like, you've got a developer in a meeting that could give two shits about 97% of what you're talking about. It's actually a big waste of their time. And so there's a lot of people pleasing with some of these meetings and whatnot. And I get it to some extent. But what we do is, as we're doing our quarterly planning and yearly planning, we look at, the organizational chart, what is their skill? What are they amazing at? Do they add value in what we're going to be working on, this next quarter? If they don't, and it doesn't mean that they're not a valuable team member, it just means that, if we're talking about sales and lead generation and all that kind of stuff, do I really want to bother, certain members of the team that they're not involved in that in any capacity? No, I do not. And then it's, yes or no, should they be in the room? And then the next question is like, are we saying that they should be in the room to be nice? And then, be honest with yourself, yes and no. And then, basically from there, we make a decision on who needs to be in it. And you've experienced this, there's times in which you've been in the leadership huddles, and then there's a 6-month season in which you haven't been. That doesn't mean you're not a well-respected leader in the organization. It just means that I don't want to waste your time because it's very valuable. And we just don't need you in that season for those things that we're working on.
Right. And so my next question was going to be, have you ever had to remove someone from the room for the sake of the team? And how did you handle it? Because I know, I didn't experience this at all, but I know that some people could experience like, oh, I'm not there. There's this ego involved. So how do you handle it? Like making sure that they understand, it's not because they're not valuable, but, it's maybe just not valuable to this conversation.
Yeah, I have. I've had to remove people from meetings, and I've had to remove people from a singular meeting and also from all of it. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a tough conversation. It's just a real conversation. When it's been from a particular meeting, and we actually had like a safe word for it as well. And it was a gentleman's name who was notorious for this. He would just go down rabbit holes in conversations and be all over the place, to the point you were just confused and there was no answer or no value add. So we started saying, if anyone did that, we're just going to start saying Brad. And then they knew like, oh, yep, I'm spiraling. And then we actually have a moderator that was assigned, in this meeting in particular, to be mindful of this. And if anyone's doing this, just say Brad. And, and that individual in particular, I mean, he actually was removed from the meetings for a season, just because, as much as he wanted to be a part of it and he was a leader, there was nothing that we were doing that impacted his department, and nothing that he could really add value to impact what we were working on. And yeah, do I think it was an ego blow for him personally? Yeah, probably. But my hope is, and we've done this here too, my hope is people see that, leadership, or in this case, me, is paying attention. And, you guys have a lot to do. I don't want to increase your workload, but making you feel obligated to be a part of something that, there's no value exchange there.
Right. So the next thing I kind of want to talk about is WOI. So this is weaknesses, opportunities, and importance, right? It's definitely a cool tool because it gets straight to the truth. So let's role play like we're having a sit down right now, right? So where do you personally feel like you dropped the ball this year?
Again, just overcommitting to certain things. And I mean, I had this, conversation last week with Adrian on our team. I left him a voice note. It was like, man, I'm so sorry that I did not communicate very well how busy this week of travel was going to be for me. And I promised you I would do these things for you. And I'm just trying to be where I'm at, which means I'm not thinking about these things, even though I was actually doing the activities that I was asked to record. I was doing it. I was just trying to be so present where I was at with you guys. And, I get to I'm driving, I was coming to pick you guys up, and I left him this voice note because I'm like, man, I hate the fact that I committed to something, and because I'm not getting it done, it's actually impacting somebody else. And so, and I love the conversation that we had, recently around that, which was, hey, thank you. And if we need to pivot and do this differently, we can. Let's just be honest about it. And I'm like, and I appreciate the candor there. But that was really where I dropped the ball the most. And there were seasons where I wasn't spending enough time focusing on like my own emotional regulation with certain clients and certain things. And I sometimes like this idea of, oh yeah, this client's going to be a huge pain in the ass, but I can fix them. No, it's a big waste of time. And just because they weren't in alignment with our core values, I saw the flags from the very beginning. And again, there was a season where I was like, I've got to chase and get to this number, because once I get to this number, then everyone's going to think, oh, I'm so amazing. And also, who cares?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was really cool because you would. I remember being in those calls or being next to you when you were in those calls. You'd get off the call and you'd be like, "Man, this person did this, such a pain in the ass." And then like a couple weeks later, they're a client, and then after, you're like, "Man, I knew it. I knew they were going to be a pain." But yeah, so where do you think your team struggled the most this year?
I think sometimes asking for help.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that we're very specific that we want people that have 5 to 10 or 10 to 20,000 hours of experience here. We want amazing people. The difference is, though, even though you may have all this experience, like, you only know what you know, and we do things in a very elevated manner that doesn't necessarily make sense to everyone else. And so they almost have to get humbled a little bit when they're here, or even folks that have been here and they get promoted into another role. Like, there are these moments where it is really okay to say, like, I need some help. But I think there's a lot of pride naturally in a lot of people, so they're like, no, I'll just figure it out, I've got it. And I think that's where there were some short seasons of that showing up.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and I think when we do that, we start becoming kind of like the bottleneck, without realizing it until it's sometimes, I don't want to say too late, but then you get a big slap in the face, and it's like, oh yeah, I need I need help. Like, so yeah. So what do you think kept breaking this year that you may have ignored too long, if anything?
I don't think anything kept breaking. I just think, one of the things that we're really leaning into, especially, based off that last question too, is, how do we, in a more strategic and formulaic manner, enroll somebody at BLG as this amazing, individual that has all the accolades and everything, and get them, up to, the standard of understanding that, a lot of us carry. And so, and a lot of times, and I've mentioned this, sometimes we hire when it's too late. I've done it too. And they say, what does the training look like? And you're like, oh, it's on the job. It's when you're doing the work.
Yeah.
And that's not fair to them. And
Right.
so one of the biggest things for us right now is just, how do we create this BLG university, so to speak, and create this level of comfortability for someone so that they're really understanding of all the components in the ecosystem of what we do.
Yeah. So I think that might lead into my next question, but moving away from weaknesses and into opportunities, what opportunity did you see this year, but didn't necessarily get a chance to, or didn't act on yet?
I think sometimes I'm so focused because, like, I know we are so great at what we do that there were moments in which I just said, fuck it, we're going to do all these things for ourselves and show everybody our greatness with our own, ads and our own everything. And in those seasons too, like, I think the team was really excited about the idea of it, but the team's also busy taking care of clients. So, I didn't lean into opportunities which were using, third-party resources and amazing people in my network to say, hey, I know you're really, really, really good at this. Like, I want to invest in you to do that thing for us. Instead, I was like, no, we'll go through the training, we'll figure it out, which is fun to some extent. Like, it's enjoyable, but also, again, you have to be really mindful of the team. And do they actually have the bandwidth, or are they agreeing to do this just because they want to, be more valuable or whatever it may be?
Yeah. So if moving on to importance, if you could fix 3 things before next year, which is coming up pretty soon, what would those 3 things be?
Training, number one, making sure we have that, this BLG university, so to speak, for new people when they enroll, so that they feel more comfortable. 2, getting out of my own damn way. Not, we talked the other day in our Limitless Leaders call about, our week and what that looks like. And there are certain things that I still do that bleed me. I really good at enrolling people into what we do, and whether it be on the, HR side and hiring new people, or, potential clients. And it exhausts me because it takes so much out of me. I'm an introverted extrovert. Like, I thrive honestly in a little bit of isolation and quiet and everything else, and just being alone. I'm really good at, public speaking and, this kind of stuff, and having these conversations with, leads that we're trying to enroll, but it just takes a lot out of me. And, I know that I am a lid when it comes to growth, because I am not doing 8 to 10 sales calls a day. I would be exhausted. And so, in this season of, growth that we're going into, I know it's only sustainable for a period of time for me. And I'm going to have to bring somebody else in that actually, is fed by that type of, energy and environment. And then the third thing, honestly, probably, and it ties into the first one, but spending more time with the team in one-on-ones and, in group settings. I pulled myself out of most meetings this year to stay focused and protect, my energy. But, as of like even last week, and I'd shared this on a call we were on earlier, it was sitting with one of our team members from, around the world, and them saying, the culture we've built through screens is amazing, but people just need to get to know you and spend time with you in person. And like, there's magic there. A, that felt really good to hear. But B, I was like, man, I can't just isolate and be away from the team, because there is so much that I can give. And so I need to create, that container for myself to do that more.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So let's talk about the quarterly project plan, right? So a plan obviously it means nothing without ownership. Action is what really moves the business forward. So how do you decide your top priorities for, let's say, Q1?
Yeah, so all these things are linear. So when you're, doing, whether it be rise targets in the very beginning or leveraging your P&L and pro forma, that is, those are the, KPIs, so to speak, that you're going after. Then you look at, how do we develop the leadership bench that's going to, work on these things? And then you go into this WOI exercise, which is, where do we have weaknesses? Where are there opportunities, that we can accelerate next year? And then what's the, layer of importance? And then you leverage all that information to build this quarterly plan. And all these things I'm talking about are very similar to EOS and the Entrepreneur's Operating System. Great platform. This just has more depth. And I want to get in the weeds, so to speak, when it comes to this planning, because what I experienced from EOS was it was very high level, which is fine. It didn't create enough accountability. And so you could show up and it was like, is this happening or not? And you were a part of some of these meetings, and you would see, instead of someone saying yes or no, well, yeah, I feel like we're on track, but then, and it's like, nope, that right there needs to stop. So with this planning, you basically, what are the really high level projects that you need to focus on to get, a particular theme done. And what I mean by that is, growth could be a theme, operational excellence could be a theme, data and reporting could be a theme, culture could be a theme. You identify through that WOI, like, what are the 2 themes that are really important for this quarter? And we've done 4 or 5 themes before. That's insane. It's very chaotic and it's way too much. So what are the 2 most important themes? So for us, it's right now, it is training, growth. Growth is mine. Growth is my container. I own that. Everything inside of there, even though there are team members that may assist with some of those projects are mine to own. I have to show up to those meetings and say that these things got done. Underneath those projects are tasks. So what really important things have to get done, in order for this project to be completed. And then next to those, you identify who's responsible for that task. It may not be the owner of it, of the whole project. It may be somebody else. but ultimately, I'm going to answer for what's getting done there. And then you identify due dates, and the due dates are very important because they help you plan and see if you're being very realistic in your planning, because you have to think about everything else going on in your business during this period of time. And they raise the level of accountability. And so as you're going through and creating these projects, in these different verticals or themes, you then show up to these leadership meetings and then go, okay, let's, pull out the playbook. Where are we at? All right, Dustin, you own these projects. Let's go through one by one. How are we showing up? And it's, hey, yeah, we're doing the thing. It's going really well. We didn't anticipate this. I took too much on that I didn't realize. And so I've got to move some stuff around. The other thing I love about it is there's another component or tab, because it's just a spreadsheet, that is it's a parking lot. We may have another really great idea or opportunity that's come up, or we've identified another weakness, and we have to decide in that moment, do we add it to the sheet, and do we have the bandwidth to actually add it to the sheet, or is this just shiny object or something else we can work on next quarter? Or if it is super, super important that it needs to go into the sheet right now, do we need to move something else to next quarter? And what I love about it, especially when I was doing a lot of one-on-one coaching with other businesses, is it was so funny to see how excited they would get about this tool, but then also they would lose momentum because they way overcommitted themselves. Oh yeah, we'll get all this done. Now that we have a plan, this is going to be super easy. And then life happens, and then business happens. And the one thing that I noticed even in our own businesses was, don't overcommit. You need to stretch a little bit, but be realistic, because this is not the day to day. And you need to be mindful of, how involved are you in the day to day?
Yeah, man. It was all back to that old saying, man, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, right?
If you're running $1 million business, but growth is stalled, then this message is for you. I'm Blake from Best Life Group, and we've helped businesses break through revenue ceilings. You've probably tried everything to break through: complex funnels, expensive ad campaigns, chasing the next big trend. It's exhausting, isn't it? And frustrating when the needle barely moves. Well, here's the thing. Growing your business isn't about throwing Hail Marys and hoping for a touchdown. It's about consistency, moving the ball down the field with first downs. That's where our 25% rule comes in. It's straightforward. Drive 25% more quality traffic to your website, convert 25% more of that traffic into leads and sales, then increase the value of each customer by 25%. These aren't massive changes, but together they'll add up to major yardage. We've used this approach with hundreds of businesses in your revenue range. The result? They've consistently broken through plateaus, often doubling their income without the stress of always swinging for the fences. Want to see how we can apply this game plan to your business? Let's talk strategy. Book a free 20-minute session with our team. Click below to schedule your session now, and in just 20 minutes, you'll get a fresh perspective on your current playbook. We'll get clarity on what's stopping your forward progress, get a clear picture of where you stand versus where you could be, and share some case studies from other business owners that we've helped. When it makes sense, we'll discuss how we can work together to make the same happen for you. No pressure, no hype, just a straightforward conversation about moving your business down the field, one first down at a time. So let's turn those steady gains into a major victory for your business.
So let's move to maybe dealing with people overall, maybe that hate feedback. Every team member or every team has someone that gets defensive with feedback. So let's kind of talk about handling that, because I know you've dealt with it in real time. So how do you give feedback to someone who always takes it personally?
Honestly, man, we lean so heavily into our core values and mutually beneficial relationships that it's not mutually beneficial for the company, the individual or the person, sharing the feedback, if, we haven't created this environment where it feels like there's enough trust and safety there to have the conversation. But, and if it's not, and we had this recently with a team member probably 6-8 weeks ago, that it wasn't happening. It wasn't working well. So we just knew that they weren't a good fit. And, there were a couple of conversations ahead of time, but because we lean so heavily into, who we are and what makes us, BLG, I think it's very easy to have those conversations. When there's a lack of alignment with who you say you are, those conversations are very tough. Like anytime I've ever had to let somebody go, and it was tough to let them go, other than the human side of things, which is you're not going to have a job and money coming in for a period of time. Yeah, that sucks. Yeah. No matter, how they showed up, or how they didn't show up for work. But it's made those conversations so much easier. And when it's been tough, it's when I've actually done a poor job of coaching and spending time with them and showing them, the way. I mean, there used to be a gentleman I worked with 2 years ago, and I really love how he initially started showing up because he needed the opportunity so bad. But the second he started making a little bit of money, his true colors started to show, and the guy started being late all the time. But I really felt for him as a person and what he was going through personally. So every week we'd have another realignment, as he would call it. And he was so gracious for all these conversations. And then I think he just got very comfortable. He did something that was, very out of our core values. And I just said, enough is enough. So I, met the guy out in the warehouse. He was out working in our warehouse. I went out there and it was just like, hey man, I want to talk to you about something. First of all, the decision's been made. So we're not going to talk about how we, take some steps backwards. You are terminated. And I was like, but, let me kind of walk you through how we got here. And I'll never forget this guy. He gets up and he shakes my hand and he goes, thank you so much for the opportunity. Instead of, how it goes when you don't have all those conversations, they're surprised. Mm-hmm. And it's not fun when you're surprising them. And so, and he knew what he did and what he'd been doing consistently. So, that's when it's not so tough. I mean, I felt bad for him because I knew the impact it was going to have on his kids and his family for a period of time. But at the end of the day, I also did everything I could do to try to avoid it.
Yeah. Do you feel like you had any tough conversations this year like that?
Yes.
What was the toughest that you had this year?
Man, somebody having their first child and, asking for time off, which was totally fair, wanted to also be paid for it. And I said, if you have PTO for that time, lean into your PTO. If you don't, then lean into unpaid time off. It is what it is. They looked at what they had left. They didn't have enough time. They used all the time to go do something else, and then turned around and said, hey, how do we figure this thing out? And I'm like, look, our policies are our policies. I can't change them for one, because it's not fair for everybody else. And I knew that, this individual was going to be very upset. Mm-hmm. But, going back to our values, like, it's not mutually beneficial for me to give somebody else more whatever, in this case, time off or more favor or more anything. We were able to solve that very differently. But yeah, it was a tough conversation, because from one father to who was going to be another, I'm like, that's the most special moment of your life. And if money is going to create stress during that time, which is supposed to be so happy and joyous, I didn't want to feel like I was a part of that equation that made it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want you to share just briefly, I know we're getting close to time, but I want you to share briefly how you solved that problem, how we ended up solving that problem, because I think it's important for people to hear that.
Yeah, it's funny too, because I've gotten feedback on it initially, and some other business owners are like, why didn't you just give it to them? I'm like, no, read the whole message. So, I've been encouraged a lot lately to meditate a lot more. And honestly, and what I love about it is, prayer is when you talk to God, meditation is when you listen. Mm-hmm. And I was just sharing with a friend about the situation and how upset I was about it. And as I was sitting there reflecting, it just, I don't know, it just like came to me. And it was like, you know what? I'm not just going to write a bonus check or something like that, because that's also just not fair. And then you can also give team members too much leverage that every time something goes wrong, Dustin's just going to save you. And I don't want that. And so I was like, our team, everyone loves each other so much and is so there for each other, even though we're all over the world. And I was like, this could be a really special moment, for the team to lean in and basically crowdsource, their paid time off for another individual. And also for this other individual to really feel the culture and the love here. And so, without skipping a beat, I introduced it in a message to the team or an email to the team, excluding that individual, and was like, there's no pressure here. At the end of the day, if, the team doesn't take care of this, we had agreed, we'll take care of it. We'll just give our time off to him. I mean, at the end, I wanted him to really enjoy this moment, but then, just instantly it was email after email after email of, I'll give a day, I'll give a half a day, I'll give whatever I've got. Some team members like, I didn't even know I had any. And I'm like, that's terrible. You should have read the policy manual. But there was just, it was so fucking cool. And then to share that message, with this individual and the response, like I was a kid, like waiting for Santa. I'm like, all right, when's the email coming in? Come on. And then when we finally got it, man, it just, to read his response and just the level of love that he felt from a bunch of folks from around the world that communicate, via a screen was just a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Yeah. And I want to just like reiterate the point that that's what it was about. It wasn't just about giving him the time. It was about him feeling cared about and feeling the culture. Like, I think that was the big piece.
Yeah.
And that buy-in was everything. So great stuff, man. So I want to go ahead and wrap this up. We got to do our rapid fire. So I want you to answer these off the top of your head. So let's go. Boss mode or beast mode? Which one?
Boss mode.
Slow growth or scale fast?
Scale fast, because they're both painful.
Mm-hmm. Call them out or call them up?
Call them up.
Time management or energy management?
Energy management.
Biggest boss move you've made this year?
Massive investment in myself.
Next year's boss move?
Massive investment in you guys.
Awesome. So closing the year like a boss is not about perfection, guys. It's about honesty, ownership, and growth. So Dustin, last one for you. When you think about next year, what's the one thing you want to leave behind and one thing you want to carry forward?
I want to leave behind the idea that I have to prove to anyone anymore. And the one thing that I want to lean into is just our world-class greatness.
Sweet. And for everybody listening, if this helped you, share it with somebody who needs to have a real year-end review, not a polite one. And if you want to go deeper, join us inside Limitless Leaders, where we do build leadership that doesn't collapse under pressure. And as always, guys, grab life by the horns, and we will see you next week. Peace.